My name is Somkid. I'm 80 years old, and I want to begin with something about discipline that most people never consider. The kind of discipline that actually transforms a life does not announce itself. It does not feel heroic. It does not look impressive from the outside. It does not feel, most of the time, like discipline in any sense that the word usually carries. The most transformative discipline I have ever encountered is so quiet, so ordinary, so unglamorous, that most people walk past it their entire lives without recognizing it as the thing they were looking for. It happens in the small decisions that no one sees, in the quality of attention you bring to moments that feel inconsequential, in the practice of returning again and again to something you value, not because returning is always easy, but because the value is real and the practice is honest. That kind of discipline, accumulated over years and decades in the texture of ordinary days, does something to a person that no dramatic gesture or heroic effort ever quite manages. It changes them from the inside, quietly, permanently, in ways they often do not fully recognize until much later, when they look back and realize that what they are now is the product of 10,000 small decisions they hardly noticed making. Maybe you have tried discipline before and found it unsustainable. Maybe you have started things with great intention and found that the intensity eventually exhausted itself. Maybe you have looked at your own patterns and wondered why the things you genuinely want to change seem to resist change so stubbornly. If any of that is true, stay with me, because what I want to share is not a system or a schedule or a more rigorous set of rules to impose on yourself. It is something much simpler and much more durable than any of those things. I was born in northern Thailand and entered the monastery as a young man, full of the kind of energy that tends to mistake intensity for depth. I worked hard. I sat long hours. I imposed strict forms on my outer life and congratulated myself on the discipline I was building. And in some ways it was real. The outer forms held. The schedule was kept. The visible marks of a serious practice were present. But something underneath remained almost entirely unchanged. The same fears, the same reactive patterns, the same old ways of interpreting the world and my place in it that had been there before any of the outer discipline began. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to understand why. The discipline I was practicing was pointed at the surface. The transformation I was hoping for needed to happen somewhere much deeper, and the something deeper did not respond to force or intensity or impressive outer forms. It responded to something much quieter, to patient, honest, consistent attention, to the kind of presence that does not demand immediate results, to the kind of practice that is not performing for any audience, including yourself. The discipline that quietly transforms your life from within begins with honesty. Not the honesty of confessing your faults to others or to yourself in elaborate ways. The quiet, practical honesty of seeing clearly what is actually happening in your own mind, moment by moment, without adding unnecessary interpretation to what you see. This requires something that most people find very difficult. It requires you to observe yourself without immediately judging what you observe, without immediately needing to fix it or explain it or feel good or bad about it. Just see it. A thought arises, you see the thought. A feeling comes, you see the feeling. An impulse appears, you see the impulse. That seeing, that quality of honest observation without immediate judgment, is the foundation of the entire inner transformation that genuine discipline can produce. Because what is seen clearly can gradually change in ways that what remains invisible cannot. And here's what I didn't understand then. Most of what I called discipline in my early years was not actually about seeing clearly. It was about managing what I saw, about controlling the surface expression of patterns I had never genuinely examined. And managing the surface, while it can make life more functional, does not produce the kind of inner transformation that changes who you actually are when no one is watching and nothing is requiring you to perform. The second element of transformative quiet discipline is consistency over intensity. This is something I have said before in other contexts, but it is worth saying again because it contradicts something very deep in how most people approach change. The mind that is searching for transformation tends to reach for intensity, for the practice that demands everything, for the commitment so total that failure is not an option. And intensity has its place. There are moments when it is genuinely called for. But as a foundation for sustained inner change, intensity is unreliable. It depends on energy and motivation and favorable conditions that cannot be maintained indefinitely. And when the intensity finally flags, as it always does, what is left is either collapse or the slow understanding that something more sustainable must be found. Consistency is more sustainable because it does not require ideal conditions. It does not require enthusiasm or clarity or the feeling that what you are doing is working. It requires only the practice of returning. Every day, however briefly, however imperfectly, returning to the quality of attention that is the core of the practice, returning to honest seeing, returning to the breath, returning to the body, returning to the simple commitment to be genuinely present to whatever is here. That returning, practiced daily across years and decades, accumulates into something that intensity alone can never build. Not because the individual returns are impressive, because there are so many of them, because they become, over time, not something you do, but simply how you are. The third element is what I would call the discipline of the ordinary. The practice of bringing genuine attention to things that the mind considers too small to deserve it. The meal eaten with real presence, the conversation listened to completely, the walk taken with genuine attention to what is actually there, rather than as an opportunity to process the thoughts that are more interesting to the mind than the world they are ignoring. The ordinary moment met as if it were worth something. These practices are easy to dismiss as too small to matter, but the quality of attention you bring to the ordinary moments of your life is the quality of attention you will have available when extraordinary moments arrive. You cannot summon genuine presence on demand. You can only discover, in a moment that needs it, the quality of presence you have been cultivating in all the moments that did not seem to need it. You know what surprised me most? When I began to practice this genuinely, what changed first was not the big things. It was the texture of ordinary experience. The day itself felt different, not because external circumstances had changed, because I was actually inside it, actually present to what was happening, rather than conducting my life from some slight remove while thinking about something else. And from inside that presence, things that had seemed complicated gradually became simpler, not because they were resolved, because they were actually met, and meeting something directly, genuinely, without the distortion of half attention and accumulated story, almost always reveals it to be more workable than the distance made it appear. The fourth element is patience with the pace of genuine change. This is perhaps the most demanding aspect of transformative quiet discipline, because genuine inner change is slow. Not slow in the frustrating sense of not working, slow in the sense that what is being changed is very deep and very old, and very thoroughly embedded in how the nervous system has learned to operate. The patterns that shape your reactions, your interpretations, your habitual ways of meeting difficulty and pleasure and uncertainty, those patterns were not built in a day, and they do not change in a day. They change through the patient accumulation of different experiences, through the practice, repeated enough times, that new grooves begin to form alongside the old ones. Through the gradual discovery that the old automatic responses are not the only ones available, that something else is possible, that you can pause where you used to react, that you can see where you used to be captured, that you can choose where you used to be driven. That pace of change asks something of you that urgency cannot provide. It asks trust, not blind trust, the earned trust that comes from seeing across many small experiences over time that the practice is actually producing something real, that the quality of your inner life is genuinely different than it was. Not perfectly different, not dramatically different, but different in a way that matters, in a way that you recognize as the product of the quiet work, not of the dramatic gesture. The fifth element is what I would call inner accountability without harshness. Most people relate to the idea of accountability through the lens of self-criticism. They hold themselves accountable by reviewing their failures with severity, by punishing themselves internally and sometimes externally for the ways they have not lived up to what they intended. And while there is something real about the need to see honestly when you have not done what you meant to do, the harshness that most people bring to that seeing is not honest. It is punitive. And punishment does not produce the kind of change it promises. It produces shame, and shame contracts. It makes the next genuine attempt more difficult, not less, because the bar has been raised with humiliation, and the risk of failure has been made heavier with the accumulated weight of past failures. Inner accountability without harshness looks different. It looks like honest seeing without the addition of condemnation. It looks like recognizing when you have drifted from your intention and returning without ceremony. It looks like learning from what did not work without making that learning into evidence about your fundamental worth. And that quality of honest, unkind accountability is itself one of the quietest and most powerful practices of transformation available, because it changes the relationship between you and your own inner life into something more like genuine partnership and less like an ongoing war. The sixth element is the understanding that discipline, at its deepest level, is not something you impose on yourself. It is something you discover you already are. This distinction is one that took me decades to genuinely understand. The discipline I tried to impose in my early years always felt like a foreign presence, like something being forced onto a nature that was resisting it. And it felt that way because it was. I was trying to make myself be something rather than discovering what I actually was when the noise and confusion were reduced sufficiently to hear it. The quiet discipline that transforms, the kind that actually becomes part of who you are, rather than something you are always having to maintain through effort, is not imposed. It emerges from genuine values that are genuinely yours, from the recognition that what you are practicing actually matters to you, not because you should value it, because you do. And when the discipline comes from that place, from genuine alignment between what you value and how you are living, it stops requiring so much force. It starts to feel more like being yourself than like becoming someone else. At 80 years old, the discipline that has transformed my life is not visible in any dramatic outer form. It is visible, if it is visible at all, in the quality of how I am present, in the slowness with which I react compared to how I once reacted, in the gap that now exists between what happens and what I do with what happens, in the quality of attention I can bring to a simple conversation, or a simple morning, or a simple moment of difficulty. None of that looks like discipline from the outside, but from the inside, it is the product of the most real discipline I have ever practiced. Not the kind that impressed anyone, the kind that quietly changed everything. Tell me in the comments what you are hoping this kind of discipline might change in your own life. Not the dramatic transformation, the quiet one. The one that would show up not in how you appear, but in how you actually experience being you. And if this message gave you something honest to return to, stay close to this space, because the discipline that transforms quietly cannot be rushed, but it can be begun right here in the ordinary texture of this ordinary day.